Now, before we move on with this topic, we're going to be talking to the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, in just a moment. But we've got time to squeeze in some of your views first. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. Christine, hi Christine, has said, "Hi Tom, nice to see you back." Good to be back. The reason Starmer and Cooper squashed the Rwanda scheme is because it was a Conservative idea, so says Christine. I think there's probably quite a bit of partisan truth to that, although the Labour Party can rightly say it never really got off the ground. Evan says, "Please can someone explain to me how Germany can look at the Rwanda scheme when we're constantly told it's in breach of ECHR laws?" Well, Evan, I think one of the big reasons here is that Germany doesn't want to use Rwanda to permanently place migrants there. The exploration that the German officials have been saying this week is about just using it for offshore processing rather than everyone going there to stay for all time. Perhaps that's something that Britain could have looked at that would have got around some of those ECHR problems. But Bruce has written in to say, "Summit in the Labour handbook really means a jolly." Well, Bruce, I have to say, right opposite the National Crime Agency headquarters is a really marvellous pub called the Black Dog. It's actually in one of Taylor Swift's new songs, so perhaps that's where Yvette Cooper et al. Are going afterwards. But I'm delighted to say that joining me now from Westminster is the Minister of State for Security, Dan Jarvis. Dan, thank you so much for making the time for us this afternoon. Is yet another summit really what's needed here?
Well, good afternoon, Tom. This is an important drawing together of senior ministers chaired by the Home Secretary, but with the Foreign Secretary, the Attorney General, and with operational partners, the intelligence services, the National Crime Agency, Border Force, and representatives from the Ministry of Justice, to look very carefully at the work that we are doing to tackle the vile criminal networks that are smuggling, trafficking people across the Channel on a regular basis. This is a big priority for the government. We've inherited a situation, frankly, of chaos, where there wasn't the focus, there wasn't the resource, there wasn't the arrangements in place to tackle the problems upstream. We've got organised to do that, and today's gathering is about ensuring, ahead of the appointment of a border security commander, that we are best organised and we've got the resources in the right place to tackle this very difficult but very important problem.
The Home Secretary, when she got into office, said that she would appoint such a commander immediately. It's been almost 2.5 months since that immediate promise was made, and still we're waiting. In the meantime, 8,000 people have crossed the English Channel just since this government got into office. It takes the total of this year to 22,000. And just this week, 12 deaths as well. Why hasn't this appointment happened already?
Well, firstly, on your point about the deaths, every death is an absolute tragedy, and that's why we're working at pace to prevent people from having to make this most perilous of journeys. That's why we're in the process of appointing a border security commander, and you will see an announcement about that in the near future. It's an important role because what it will do is coordinate all of the activity to tackle these vile criminal networks upstream. It's incredibly important that we draw together all of the resources of government, but critically, we need to work cooperatively with our neighbours both in Europe but also internationally as well. We are not going to solve this problem from the UK. What we need to do is have very good working relationships with colleagues in Europe, particularly with France, but with other countries as well, but also internationally. Look at the work that the National Crime Agency have just done recently with Bulgaria. 40 small boat engines have been seized. That means that there are 40 small boats that will no longer be making the crossing. That's around about 2,400 people not making the crossing who otherwise would have done. Look at the work that we've been doing in Libya, working with the Libyan police force.
Is less seaworthy vessels and more people. The same number of people are in Calais, the same number of people want to come across, but if they have fewer boats on which they can come across, perhaps less seaworthy boats on which they can come across. I mean, if you're just attacking the boats, the people are still there, the people still want to come. You've got no deterrent for the people. Doesn't that mean more deaths?
the focus needs to be and is on the vile criminal networks that seek to traffic people from right around the world. That's why we've been working in Libya. That's why we are working in a range of different countries around the world to ensure that people look at the UK and think and see that we are a hard target, a difficult place to get into. And that's why the Home Secretary has convened this gathering today to focus those activities and make sure that we are best organised to work collaboratively amongst ourselves, but also critically internationally as well. We've seen, actually, in terms of the numbers, and you rightly challenged me on the numbers, but the numbers for the months of July and August are 22% down on the comparative figures for the months of July and August of last year. This is a difficult problem, but your viewers should understand the importance that we attach to it and the fact that we are more effectively using the resource that the previous government wanted to squander on the Rwanda scheme, which was an expensive gimmick. It was never going to work.
Now the Germans
We've taken the money
using.
that was going to be used for that, and we are reinvesting it in our National Crime Agency and in ways that we can ensure that we can more effectively target the vile criminal networks that are putting people in boats.
We are limited on time, so I do want to move on
you'll see
to
a border
another
security
issue
commander
here.
appointed in the very near future who will make a big contribution to that process.
And that other issue is, of course, the consequence of 8,000 illegal migrants coming across since your government came into office. Because these migrants have to go somewhere while the processing takes place. You've closed down the Bibby Stockholm barge. You're announcing you're closing down RAF Scampton. You want to close down the hotels as well. If migrants can't go on barges, they can't go in disused RAF bases, and they can't go in hotels, where are these people going to go?
Well, none of the things that you've just mentioned represented good value for taxpayers' money. We've inherited a situation where we've got a cohort of 100,000 people who haven't properly been processed by the previous government. They didn't focus on processing the asylum returns, and instead all of the eggs went into the Rwanda basket, which was ultimately a kind of a failed process. So what we've done is reinvest that resource more effectively. So we're in the process of getting 1,000 more caseworkers so that we can much more effectively process those who've made claims for asylum. Where those claims are successful, we'll be providing accommodation for those people in the normal way, but where they are not successful, those people will be returned.
Minister,
it was
you spoke through those words pretty quickly there. You'll be providing accommodation for those people in the normal way. You're going to be putting them in council houses.
No. The point I was making is that we've inherited a situation where the previous government effectively stopped the processing of those who've made asylum claims, and that meant we had this perma backlog of 100,000 people, some of whom were accommodated in hotels at huge expense to the taxpayer. That is not the way to process people's asylum claims.
But we've established you're not going to be putting people in hotels,
1,000 more caseworkers,
or RAF bases, or barges. You say they're going to be accommodated in the normal way, those that are approved, and we assume that the vast majority of these people are going to be approved. That's all of the indication from your government to this point.
No, that's not what I said, Tom. The point that I made was that where people had been processed through the system, and that wasn't happening before, they will either be returned, or if their asylum claim is successful, then they will be processed in the normal way. The problem that well, not necessarily. Let's see where we get to.
We have 90% approval
rates. Is that we've inherited a backlog of 100,000 people. The previous government didn't invest the resource in the right place in order to process the claims. We've refocused that resource on a scheme that wasn't going to work in order to get 1,000 more caseworkers, so we can actually do the work of processing these claims. That's absolutely the right way to proceed, and that is what the Home Secretary will be discussing with Cabinet colleagues today.
Minister, we are very short on time, so I'm going to try one more time. For those that are approved, for those who've come across illegally and claimed asylum, and that will be approved, as the majority will be, according to all analysis, where will they go? Will it be in limited council housing space?
Well, I don't accept the premise of your question on the assumption that the majority will be approved. There's a process in place. We need to begin that process of looking carefully at the asylum claims. Where they are unsuccessful, then people will be returned, and that's why we've been working very hard to get returns agreements in place. But Britain has a system which currently is not working. That's what we've inherited. There was the Rwanda scheme, an expensive gimmick.
I'll give you, Minister, I'll give you some ground on this one.
The Home Secretary is marshalling that effort across government so we can actually make it work.
Asylum seeker is approved. Where does that individual go? I'm not even going to claim it's going to be the 100,000. I'm not going to claim, as most experts do, it will be 90,000 or above. Let's say one. Where would that individual go? Would it be in a council house? Well, arrangements will have to be made to accommodate people who successfully are processed through the asylum arrangements. But the bigger point is that there was no processing arrangements. 100,000 people were stuck in this perma backlog because the previous government didn't put the resource in the right place. We've shifted that resource from a scheme which was never going to work so that we can actually do the work of processing people's applications. But the most important point for your viewers to understand, Tom, is that we need to put mechanisms in place where people can't get illegally into the country in the first place, and we need to tackle the problem upstream. That's why the Home Secretary is meeting with operational partners with the National Crime Agency to look at that work, to see how we can do more internationally to target the vile criminal networks and stop people getting to the northern French coast in the first place. The previous government failed to do that. It's a priority for us, and we're getting on with making sure that we can make it work. OK, Dan Jarvis, Security Minister, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on Good Afternoon Britain. Appreciate your time. And I'm sure many people will be making their own minds up about where on earth these approved migrants are actually going to end up.